Well, good evening for a change, fellow creators. It is just before 6 o'clock, Friday, August 23rd. Took a half day of work today so I could record what for me is tomorrow's video, but for you guys was last week's video. And as usual for an evening, there's more than just orange juice in this glass. Fun stuff to talk about and to get into for this evening. I'm putting a little studio time in tonight because, well, took care of everything else I needed to do, and this is how I'm going to relax this evening. Also, my weekend's a little bit packed, so I'm not going to have as much time tomorrow to paint as I normally would, so this is a good opportunity for this. In addition to also being really excited for not only the current project I'm working on, but my next one as well, which I'm actually going to start with because it involves a little bit more dry time than the other one does. So, it's probably been like 2 months at least since I was working with all of the splattery ink pieces of paper. At some point, I can't remember if I brought this up in the last... It's been like a month since the last vlog because I've been interjecting all kind of other videos. I actually wasn't even sure if last week's video about photographing art is actually... I don't know if it should have been a vlog or it should have been a regular art video, but I've had so many other things in between. I'm like, I need just like a regular good kind of tutorial video before we do another vlog. So we've now just reset things back to wherever we are on the offset weeks. So, anyway, I had a thought, a good thought of taking all of the splattery ink things that I've been doing and attaching them to some of the wood panels that I've had floating around and a lot of the ones I painted over. To deal with the issue of painting over some wood panels and having some issues with the paint being too thick, and I don't want to necessarily sand all that down. This one, I cut a relatively big sheet of paper up and split it into 3 pieces, which I'm sure you can... I'm not... You probably can't really see it from this distance, which is good, but up close you absolutely can. Because right in the middle, I lined it up the best that I could with the other one, so it is mostly hidden. But those lines are visible enough for me that I was like, all right, whatever I do with the composition, I want to be able to cover that up. And I've been dying to do a big tall composition because I haven't done a tall composition, even as extreme as this one is, in a really, really long time. So, I sketched out this idea of a big foresty thing with the trees covering up those center lines. And within that center piece is like this little village, so everything else kind of radiates out around that. Tall trees up top, roots to the bottom, and maybe a little split level thing with this cave underneath. So pretty fun idea, and because this is on paper and I want to preserve some of this underlying ink stuff, I was like, let's use watercolor. This would be a giant watercolor and gouache piece. I'm like, I haven't done anything like that in a while, and I've been dying to do more watercolor stuff anyway, especially after coming back with my friend from Artists and Craftsmen Supply a couple weeks back and getting that big tube of the Daniel Smith's Ultramarine Red. I'm like, let's lean towards those blues and greens, play with that, and obviously being watercolor, to do several layers with it. So, setting this aside until I do the first layer of watercolor and figuring out what colors I want in my watercolor. I'll probably have to kind of go back and forth with this because of how long this sticks out, but if I can at least get this started this evening, that would be great. Other fun things I'm playing with. So more of that stuff from Artists and Craftsmen that I had picked up specifically was some sanded pastel paper. Also, I can't remember if I've had a vlog since I've had both the wrist and ankle brace off, but I do. Or cast and brace. I still wear a brace periodically, which you probably saw in last week's video. But that's mostly for work. It's not the boot that it was. So in finally getting some sanded pastel paper, I'm like, okay, I think I know how I can make it now. And that's partly why I wanted to pick it up, because I'm like, I bet if I get this, I can figure out how to DIY some of it. So I've been playing a little bit with some fine pumice gel mixed with some thin acrylic, So I've got a yellow sheet, a blue sheet, and a pink sheet. And I'm playing with some pastel and charcoal on these to see how it kind of sticks, both with direct media on top of it, which has mostly been pretty good, as well as how well it works after you hit it with a layer of fixative. The goal, if this works out the way I want to try one more stone medium. Utrecht has a sand medium that is sort of in between the fine pumice gel and coarse pumice gel. It's just sort of like you threw a handful of sand in a gel. So it's a little bit more textured. I've never actually bought any of it, but I've felt a sample of it in the store, and I think getting a jar of that and experimenting with that and whether I'm mixing it with the fine pumice gel or just using that or just using one or the other will give me a better gauge. And once I do all of that, I will then make a video on how to do this. And these are on a cheap watercolor paper, so they curl a little, but definitely hold up, and you can feel that texture in them. Okay, I'm going to stop talking because that's all the stuff going on with me in this way, and I'm going to paint a little. You guys will get it in probably some level of time lapse. Or maybe I'll talk in the next segment and I'll just talk over. That's probably a better idea. I'll probably talk over whatever I'm working on here. So originally I was going to clear coat everything before I started painting, which I actually had thought I had done, but I'm actually very happy that I didn't. Because as I've been adding color, I've been noticing that underlying blue of the ink has been mixing in with my watercolors and gouache to help sort of unify that, at least in this case, the initial layers here, and get those colors a lot closer to that faded, misty background that I had envisioned in the start. So it's actually working in my favor in that regard. I actually am getting a little tired now, though, so I think as I finish up the little bit here that I'm working on, I'm going to go ahead and at least call it a session. I've been down here, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes, which is probably as much as I would normally do on a weekday anyway. I might switch out after dinner or something and do a little extra pastel work or something on those test sheets that I mentioned earlier. But as for the more serious, because you could say mental capacity that I need in order to do painting in the way that I am, especially for a piece like this, I need a little more thought process, and I don't really have it right now. A couple sips of my drink tonight probably have not helped in that regard. But, it's Friday night. I am trying to enjoy myself at the very least. That said, I am really, really loving how this is turning out so far. I think it's going to be a really crazy piece, especially when I get to sort of the final detail layers at the end. But just in my initial layers here, I'm really, really enjoying this. Again, mostly messing with watercolor. I have white gouache in here though too, mostly to help with opacity, but I'm also purposefully using it to tint things out. And again, with all of those colors mixing together with the underlying blue of the ink, I think this is going to be a pretty awesome piece overall. So it is Friday, August 30th. I know I had some recordings done last weekend, and you guys saw that, and it was like 30 seconds ago or whatever. I don't really remember anything I was talking about, if I was at all. I know I was working on some of my new pieces. Other than that, it was last week. What I'm doing this evening is kind of what I've been doing all week. So 2 weeks ago, after I changed my oil at my dad's house, my dad was continuing to pester me about keeping track of my mileage and when the last time I changed the oil was, which I do need to do. Anyway, anyone who owns a car needs to do that. But my dad has a whiteboard in his garage with like my car, his car, my mom's car, my brother's car, my grandfather's car. He has all of that information. But he's been bugging me about it for years. So the one day I was like, you know what? I bet I could get some of that Blackboard paint and just make a wall in my garage. Because whiteboards cost money. I say this as I also recently bought a specialty pack of Blackboard chalk. And after I did that, I was like, I really like this. Now I want one for the studio. So I didn't end up getting the Blackboard paint from the store because I thought, I've got enough mediums and gels and pastes and things. I bet I could just make one. So I kind of have, it's not necessarily the one coat of the paint that you would use for if you just bought the stuff entirely. What I have in my palette tonight is fine pumice gel and black gesso. This is the last layer of what's going on a corner wall in the side of my studio here. This is one of those instances where it's like, man, I got that giant bucket of fine pumice gel earlier this year, and this is exactly the kind of project I need for it. In addition to several other things I've actually probably used two like 8-ounce jars worth of stuff out of that bucket at this point. So I'm definitely using it. So if you recall, if you guys have been watching the channel for a while, sorry about the backlighting, but, you know, there's a window right here. One of the first videos I put on this channel when I first moved into this house was, actually, was it? Yeah, it was, because I had done the joint compound versus molding paste video. And then I started prepping the mural wall on the other side of the room. And that was primarily, it was something like 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 gesso to joint compound to use as a primer coat, which I did as 2 coats and then like a final gesso coat for that mural. This is basically that same thing. So it was 2, possibly 3 layers of, well, it was 2 specific layers of gesso and joint compound. The third layer was gesso, joint compound, and pumice gel. The fourth layer is black gesso, joint compound, and black gesso and joint compound, and now the final brushed coat on is just gesso and pumice gel for the final Blackboard coating. So I thought it'd be really fun to put this here. In particular, I had these couple flags hanging up over here for a long time, but nothing really else. Well, I would have loved to make the entire mural wall a Blackboard wall if I had this idea 7 years ago, but alas, that is not the case. I thought the best thing to put here, since I have my idea board on the other side, is to put my art store shopping list over here, which I always seem to lose. It's like, is it on the bulletin board? Is it just written down in the corner? If it's here, I can like go from, you know, the paint shelf to the drawing drawers and stuff and come right over here and have my list right here. So that's what I'm doing. So this is a final brushed layer to get it to be smooth but Blackboard-esque friendly for some chalk. And I'm super excited. So tomorrow morning when you guys see me, and well, the next cut of it'll be a quick cut for you guys. It'll be tomorrow morning, but I will be starting that list here and going from there, picking back up where I left off last week. Okay, so it is 10 to 7 a.m. on Saturday the 31st. This video is going up today, so I have to finish out what I'm talking about for the week. So the wall is done. Yay. Another little studio improvement. This is the chalk I was talking about yesterday. So about a month or 2 ago, Business Insider in their So Expensive series put up this video about this stuff, Hagamoro chalk. Say what you want about Business Insider, but sometimes I'm just a sucker for good marketing, and this caught my attention. So, Hagamoro chalk, to summarize that video, was made in Japan for a lot of years. The guy that owned it was retiring, and he found a guy in Korea to take over his production process. So this is Japanese chalk made in Korea. What's interesting about it, compared to something like basic Crayola, the colors are a lot brighter and a lot more vibrant, and they actually show up on a blackboard. The chalk is also very popular with like college and university level mathematicians and like physics teachers and stuff, because the way the chalk just kind of glides across the blackboard versus the little bit of resistance you get out of a cheap like school children chalk. And it shows because this is like $12 a box, and where you can get a little thing of Crayola for like 99 cents.
I'm happy to have it. It's not really an art chalk. You can't really use, I mean, you probably could use it for a drawing if you really wanted to, but it's not what it's for. Yeah, you get 16 colors, technically 15 plus a bunch of white. But I am going to create essentially 2 lists for art supplies. Some of you might be wondering, why didn't you take this all the way down? Well, my freezer is here, and the last like 6 inches, I really wanted to have that, because a lot of times I stick wet paintings and stuff over here, so I don't want to damage the chalkboard with other wet paintings. Anyway, so Blick's main color scheme is like red and white. I'm actually going to use pink. Well, I do have a red. The red does show up. So I'm going to start a list here. So Blick's. Probably can't see that super well from here. And then, since the Artists and Craftsman Supply is now a new favorite art store of mine, I don't know if it's better than, it's not necessarily better than Blake's, it's just different in a lot of ways. I went to the website. They have a lot of different colors, but blue seems to be their accent color. So I'm going to grab the blue. Blick's will be here. I'll keep A and C down here. And while I'll keep the box of chalk in my garage, I'm going to keep 1 stick of it in here, just the white, that I will be using to keep track of all of my art supply things. So this is the list that I had on my bulletin board, and now I'm going to be doing the list here, so it's nice and easier. And the only thing on my list right now, because I had 2 art store trips last month, is some of the Utrecht sand medium, which, in addition to all the other stuff I'm doing, I'm working on trying to do a homemade version of sanded pastel paper, because sanded pastel paper tends to be a little expensive, and I figured I could probably make it myself with the mediums I have, and fine pumice gel works for most of it, but I would like to experiment with a slightly coarser gel, which I may or may not have talked about in an earlier part of this vlog that I don't remember. Ran out of room. And now I have a chalkboard list for my art supplies, and this I'll have to just find a space for over here. Yay, more studio improvements. So, more fun stuff. Last week I went with a friend to the Oriental Market up the road, and I got a really nice sort of more traditional noodle bowl. I don't want to say ramen bowl because it's got like koi fish on it and stuff. I don't know if it's in Chinese or Japanese, so I don't want to say one way or the other. But when I bought it, they wrapped it in this nice big piece of Chinese newspaper. At least I'm thinking it's Chinese, but I'm not 100% sure. It's really hard to tell. If anybody knows, here's some text. Let me know exactly which Asian language that is. Could very well be Japanese, though. I have no idea. The kanji in Japanese and Chinese are, I mean, they're derivative of each other, and it's really hard for me to tell one way or the other. Could even be Korean. Now, Korean has way more circles in it. Anyway, it's the vision times. Always like to have newspaper for mixed media projects, and having something that I definitely can't read is always nice too, for more work that it maybe is inspired by more of the Eastern influences, but it doesn't necessarily need to be anything specific. So this is just a front page newspaper or whatever. So that goes down here with my other newspaper. I'm gonna get back to working on this painting and then jump into the watercolor gouache painting a little bit later. But for now, I got this one. So I did end up actually working on the watercolor piece again one more time last Sunday morning. But that's just a little segment that you're probably seeing in time lapse now as I'm working on prepping for the acrylic piece this morning. Once again, I really do love the way the watercolor piece is turning out. It's just one of those things that's going to take a little bit more time and a little bit more patience because, you know, with a watercolor gouache piece, you gotta like really wait for those layers to dry. You can't necessarily go wet on wet for absolutely everything. And it's definitely one of those things that I think it annoys me a lot about a lot of watercolorists and watercolor and videos and time lapses like that on YouTube and things I see on like Instagram Reels and TikTok and stuff. And it's always like, oh yeah, this is a quick little watercolor thing, and nobody seems to stop and tell you that, you know, you gotta let your layers dry if you're gonna go for something that actually looks pretty decent. That's the one sort of downside to working with the watercolors, and I think it's in many ways what people don't really realize is like if you're not letting all these layers dry, it's like you're going to run into way more problems than you solve as a result. Not that that's a huge issue, but you can certainly do a decent amount of stuff with wet on wet. But you reach a point where the paper just becomes so saturated that you can't do as much as you really want to. Part of the good news in being back in the studio now more regularly and being back to work, I would say even more so, is that it's really kind of reset my brain in a lot of ways. It took some time with being off for like almost 2 months. And it's weird because it's like you'd think I would have a lot more time to, you know, paint and do all that stuff. And well, technically I did. Between the brace and the boot, like I couldn't really do anything that I really wanted to do, and it really kind of threw me into a bit of anxiety and depression throughout the whole thing. So it just the entire time it was just a very miserable 2 months. And as a result, I didn't end up doing a ton, or I finished some. I'm not wasn't completely at a loss, but it definitely took a lot more out of me than I was expecting it to. That said, though, it's really happy to kind of be back into a better rhythm. And at this point, having 2 projects that I'm really excited to work on definitely help. I'm probably a little less excited to work on this acrylic piece right now, but everything else I feel pretty good about. The watercolor piece in particular, but I do have to do a little bit of back and forth with that, as well as I'm teetering in the back of my mind with some other new ideas as well. So I'm definitely feeling a bit better about this painting now. Not that I wasn't feeling good about it before, but just being able to put a little more extended working time into everything always helps. And it wasn't far enough along for me to really be happy with it. I am to the point now where I do have to let things dry a little bit more than I otherwise would, and I think stepping into the other piece is probably a good idea. So I only recorded part of that, but this is what I got now, which of course isn't going to show up unless I just move the camera all the way over here. Got a lot more of that done with the grass, put the tree placements back in, all that fun stuff. I'm probably going to go ahead and give this one of those oil buff glows at the very, very end, especially to deal with how bright the water is. I definitely want to kick that back a little bit, but I want to get that like fully detailed before I even touch anything with that, which will be at least another sitting. And I'm starting to get a little warm down here, which sucks because it was nice and cool when I got down here earlier. But I have a fan that blows in this direction now, which is good. I just can't record when I have the fan on because, at least voice record when I have the fan on. Because if I do, then it's going to blow into the mic every 3 seconds. So I'm going to move into doing the watercolor piece. And I'm probably going to go ahead and call it a vlog because I am pretty focused in on this point and I just really want to work and not have to worry about recording. So, setting this aside on top of the freezer, so, you know, that's thing from before, like, out of the way for the blackboard. And now I can get back to working on this. So, at this point I need to do a bit more in the foreground before I start kind of really going in and, foreground, back it up. I forget how long this thing is. So a little bit more sort of foreground tree stuff, a little bit what I'm doing with this cave section down below. I want to get basically all of the main washy areas of color done first. I started to do a little bit of detail work with the trees, but not a ton. At this point, it's about bringing up a lot more of the highlights, which at this point, because it was kind of dark to start with, going to be using more gouache for that than anything else. And then there will be a longer, slower process of this, which I may or may not stream down the road, or have some other talking head video where it's I put this in the background, but putting this little mushroomy village in the middle of this thing. Also looking at this, the way, as I worked on this, the paper buckled a little underneath, so I'm going to have to come in here with some paste and glue that back down towards the end. So in the efforts to hide those lines, I've actually seemed to have made them more visible. That shouldn't be absolutely terrible. I just have to do a little bit more finishing work at the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little update about what I've been working on. I'm going to get back to work and keep on creating, comment, like, subscribe, all that usual junk. And I'll see you guys next time.